Thank you for joining us as we present on the topic of governmental ethics. Navigating ethics can be a challenging experience as we integrate our own understanding of the topic with governmental standards. We hope this presentation gives the governmental employee, the supplier, and citizen important insights into ethics in government. Our presenters today are
Hi, I'm Karen Myers, Director of Procurement for Harford County Government.
Dominic Cusimano. I'm the Director of Procurement for Howard Community College.
I'm Maureen Dunn, Procurement Officer for Carroll County Government.
And Stephanie Whalen, Administrator for Harford County Government.
We, as procurement professionals, are stewards of taxpayer dollars. The foundation of government ethics is that public service is based on public trust. To ensure the public's trust, there are laws governing employee conduct. Public officials must not be subject to improper influence or the appearance of improper influence. Remember, someone's perception is their reality. The ethics laws are a set of rules aimed primarily at preventing the use of government power and authority and resources for other than their intended purpose. No special deals for ourselves, family, and friends. These rules set the basis of our decision-making. Ethics deals with what is good and bad and with moral duty and obligation. Moral principles governs persons or groups' behaviors. Moral conduct is that which is specified in your policy and procedures. Ask yourself, am I willing to take responsibility for the appropriateness of this particular purchase? Do I have any relationships that should exclude me from this vendor selection? Are my actions acceptable in both fact and appearance? To recite Maryland Public Ethics Law, Title 5, GP 5-102 of General Provisions, Article A1, the General Assembly of Maryland, recognizing that our system of representative government is dependent upon the people maintaining the highest trust in their government officials and employees, finds and declares that the people have a right to be assured that the impartiality and independent judgment of those officials and employees will be maintained. 2, it is evident that this confidence and trust is eroded when the conduct of the state's business is subject to improper influence or even the appearance of improper influence. B, policy. For the purpose of guarding against improper influence, the General Assembly enacts this Maryland Public Ethics Law to require certain government officials and employees to disclose their financial affairs and to set minimum ethical standards for the conduct of state and local business. The law seeks to assure impartiality, independent judgment, and avoid improper influence and the appearance of improper influence, and to preserve public trust in their government.
Regional ethics policy resources. It is the responsibility of employees and suppliers representatives to know these policies and procedures. While we begin the discussion about ethics, know that each entity has a unique set of policies and procedures that should be reviewed. These are but a few for counties and cities in the Baltimore region: Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, Carroll County, City of Annapolis, City of Baltimore, Harford County, Howard County, and Queen Anne's County. Here are the unique policies and procedures for school districts: Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, Carroll County, City of Baltimore, Harford County, Howard County, and Queen Anne's County. And these are the unique policies and procedures for community colleges: Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, Carroll County, City of Baltimore, Harford County, and Howard County. Key outcomes to maintain public trust. For the employee, follow ethical policies and procedures. Ensure fairness to all interested parties. Maintain integrity of procurement process. Deal honestly and in good faith. No personal benefit, including that of family members. Avoid even the appearance of unethical practices. Appearance being a key word. For the supplier, do not offer gifts of influence. Deal honestly and in good faith. Read and understand the entity's ethics policies and procedures. Do not allow tax-exempt status for government employees' personal use. Ensure you have proper authorization for an order, such as a purchase order or procurement card authorization. And again, avoid even the appearance of unethical practices. Gifts of influence are generally not a promotional item, such as a logoed pen or things handed out at conferences. They are tickets to sporting events and dinners, to name a few for illustrations. Read the local policies to get a clear definition of what is nominal and not considered influential. Conflict of interest, defined as rules of conduct established for individuals subject to the city-county laws. They set minimum standards for conduct and cover all city-county employees regardless of position. Appearance, secondary employment, having a secondary job that interacts with city-county government. Gift, the transfer of anything of economic value. Employees cannot accept or solicit gifts for themselves or others. Sometimes gifts that influence have a maximum value to help identify things that may be considered non-influential. Prestige of office. Do not use your office or position to unduly influence a person or company for your personal gain or that of another. This includes disclosure of confidential information. Safeguard, financial disclosures. Forms that certain public officials must fill out as a condition of employment and serve to validate that no conflicts of interest exist with this employee, and as a transparency tool for the public to ensure trust.
The ethical culture. It is vital to create a culture of ethics that includes well-defined policy, procedures, training, oversight, and modeling that starts from the top. When all of these things work in concert, it feeds a strong ethical culture that will thrive. You thrive when employees and the public have trust in your operations. In my procurement path, I was fortunate enough to be mentored by one of the best in our profession, Rich Shelton. Rich lived and worked by the highest ethical standards in our profession, and I tried to do the same. If my coworkers are ever in doubt, I tell them to be honest, tell the truth, and ask them, what would you say if you were under oath? As reminders of ethical conduct displayed in the office are the UPPCC Code of Ethics, and also displayed are procurement's cornerstone principles of accountability, impartiality, professionalism, transparency, service, and ethics. So I believe if you are promoting the ethical culture in your office and have policy and procedures that promote ethics in your office should succeed in gaining public trust and your entity's trust. In summarizing, no cheating, conduct business fairly, maintain the integrity of the procurement process, be truthful and transparent, no personal benefit, avoid intent and appearance of unethical behavior, know and obey the letter of spirit of laws, policies, and procedures, avoid personal activities that would conflict with professional responsibilities, do not accept gifts, handle confidential or proprietary information with due care, promote positive supplier relationships, avoid improper reciprocal agreements, encourage support for socially diverse practices. These are the ethical rules to do business by. If followed, you should be able to avoid the claim of being accused of unethical behavior. Knowing, understanding, and following these rules is one of the key components of the procurement process.
I'll now go through 2 decision-making models that you can use to evaluate potential ethical issues that you may come across. First, we'll look at Model A, which is a concise, condensed version of Model B. It's a helpful decision tree to keep in mind when challenged with a potential ethical dilemma. Extreme care should be taken to evaluate the intent and the perception of business activities. One should consider several things. 1, is it legal? 2, is it in the best interest of the employer? 3, have I considered the company values over my personal values? 4, will it influence the purchasing decision? 5, will it be perceived by peers or others as unethical? This point is particularly important because, as you've heard several times today, perceived unethical behavior can be just as damaging as actual unethical behavior, even if it might not technically violate the ethics law. 6, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Trust your gut on these sorts of things. 7, ask when in doubt. And 8, don't sweat the small stuff. The small stuff being things like a promotional logoed pen handed out to everyone at a conference, or a bag with a vendor's name on it or something like that. But again, even with the small things, use your judgment and make sure you gauge the risks of accepting something. Now, I'm going to outline a hypothetical scenario where it would have been beneficial for the state employee to run through an ethical decision-making model before proceeding. Consider Superintendent Smith, who accepted an award and cash prize from publisher Pete when his school district was about to grant a $9 million contract to publisher Pete. While the superintendent did not apply for the nationally recognized award himself, it did still present an ethical dilemma. With an attorney and a procurement officer as his advisor, the attorney recommendation was to accept the money because the award was a competitive one that the superintendent legitimately won. The procurement officer advised not to accept the money because Superintendent Smith could not overcome the appearance of the award and the resulting difficulty in claiming that it did not influence the purchasing decision that the superintendent had a final say in. Fast forwarding to after the contract was granted to the publisher, the superintendent could not overcome withholding information about the award from the board and the appearance of wrongdoing. It's also likely that other school professionals in the same position would have been advised not to take the award. So don't get caught in the trap of giving yourself special consideration because it can be tempting. The ethical issues that present themselves in this hypothetical include prestige of office violations, an employee's financial conflict of interest, an employee's impaired impartiality, and an employee's appearance of a conflict. Model B is a more procedural model that can be used for a deeper dive into potential ethical issues and how you can evaluate them. Take special note of the bolded text throughout this model, which highlights how the assessment of ethical challenges frequently goes beyond what is purely legal and what is not. First, clarify. So determine precisely what must be decided. Formulate and devise the full range of alternatives. Eliminate any patently impractical, illegal, and improper alternatives. Force yourself to develop at least 3 ethically justifiable options, and then examine each of those options to determine which ethical principles and values are involved. Next, evaluate. If any of the options requires the sacrifice of any ethical principle, evaluate the facts and assumptions carefully. Be sure to distinguish solid facts from things like beliefs, desires, theories, opinions, and rationalizations. Consider the credibility of the sources you use, especially when they are self-interested, ideological, or biased. And with regard to each alternative, carefully consider the benefits, burdens, and risks to each stakeholder involved in the process. Next, decide. Make a judgment about what is not true and what consequences are most likely to occur. Evaluate the viable alternatives according to your personal conscience. Prioritize the values so that you can choose which values to advance and which to subordinate. Determine who will be helped the most and harmed the least. And then always consider the worst case scenario. Consider whether ethically questionable conduct can be avoided by changing goals or methods or by getting consent. And then apply 3 ethics guides as you make your decision. Are you treating others as you would want to be treated? Would you be comfortable if your reasoning and decision were to be publicized in the newspaper or similar? And would you be comfortable if your family were observing you? After making your decision, implement. Develop a plan of how to implement the decision and maximize the benefits while minimizing the costs and risks. Finally, monitor and modify. Monitor the effects of decisions. Be prepared and willing to revise a plan or take a different course of action as needed and adjust to new information. Again, a common theme through all of this is that sometimes the decision is clear-cut and conflicts with the ethics laws are obvious. But just as often, there are gray areas where you may need to rely on your gut and advice from others to determine the best way forward. I'll now walk through one more scenario with potential ethics violations where the involved employee would benefit from following this decision-making model. Suppose Ben is a state college instructor of physical education and athletic trainer. His father owns Globo Gym, and his wife also works for the company as a sales rep, but she has no ownership interest in the company. The college purchases team uniforms from Globo Gym. Ben has no involvement in the ordering of team uniforms. Similarly, he does not produce requisitions, select vendors, or oversee the budget. He simply works within the same department that orders the product. Now, the potential ethical issues that show up in this case are secondary or outside employment, prestige of office, employee financial conflict of interest, employees' relatives' financial conflict of interest, and employment relationship impairing impartiality or independence of judgment. After considering the scenario, there's likely no technical conflict of interest so long as Ben is kept away from any matters involving Globo Gym and doesn't attempt to influence any college business with the company. That being said, there may still be a perception of conflict of interest to consider, which will need to be weighed by the school. Regardless of what path you follow when evaluating ethical dilemmas, one piece of advice I always like to give is to consult with others. In the matter of ethics, it is always best to consult with your ethics authorities, whether that be your institution or employer's attorney or the ethics commission. Seek advice, especially when in doubt. And suppliers should also feel comfortable discussing ethical standards and procurement with the government entity they are doing business with. While every employee should understand these ethics laws, based on the consequences of poor ethical actions, it is recommended to seek this advice from the procurement office. This latter piece is advice that I give, especially if your employer does not have an ethics officer or an attorney on staff. I know at my institution, we don't have an ethics officer, and we do not have any in-house counsel. And so in that case, it's often procurement who is well positioned to either offer up ethics advice or help guide you toward those who can, such as the Maryland State Ethics Commission. Procurement tends to be knowledgeable about ethics issues more so than some other departments because they often crop up in the context of purchases.
Thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you for joining us for this presentation on governmental ethics. If you still have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me by contacting me, the information listed on this slide. Thank you.